All right, people. Let me apologize right away for the poor lighting situation. This is a function of the current dwelling that I'm in, apparently having no available lighting in the area where I need to record. Lamp doesn't work. The one light is in the hallway over there, and it barely illuminates anything. So I don't know what to do. You're going to have to watch this grainy version of me. Maybe it'll even somehow enhance your enjoyment of this because it seems mysterious or ominous that I'm coming at you from this dark little corner of a room. But this is all I can work with. I even tried to install my phone on this little sort of ledge above me with the flashlight on, so at least I have some light beaming down. So that's all I got. And maybe I'll even try to scare you because it's really dark. And I can go, whoo, and maybe something will jump out from behind me and even kill me. That would be a nice way to go. Being murdered on live stream because I didn't secure proper lighting. Anyway, so Trump acquitted today. Shocking, absolutely no one in the entire country. Now, what does that tell you about the impeachment process? It tells you that it was preordained, which everybody knew right away, even when they were discussing impeachment months and even years ago. Nobody thought that there was a slightest chance that Trump would ever be convicted by the Senate, but they pressed forward with it anyway because they didn't want to use impeachment as a mechanism to actually oust Trump. They wanted to use it to punish and embarrass him. Okay? And, it's the constitutional prerogative of the House to use impeachment as a means of doing that if they see fit. But it does show the hollowness and arbitrariness of how impeachment is now sort of weaponized. If there was never even a question, it was never even a plausible possibility in the remotest sense that it would eventuate in Trump's removal from office. So you'd think that with something as historic as an impeachment acquittal vote, or at least an impeachment verdict vote, the nation would be riveted. Only the third time it's ever happened in U.S. history. And really only the second time in the modern era. You'd think the nation would be riveted, say, oh my God, this is a really pivotal time for the country to all sort of be collectively tuned in to see what's going to happen with this incredibly consequential vote that's either going to cause the ouster of the president or not. We all have to kind of drop what we're doing and make sure we're tuned in. But I just don't get the sense that that's how this was interpreted. I get the sense that people largely ignored it. It's not like everybody was like waiting with bated breath to find out the outcome, right? So now you have, nonetheless, a spate of headlines. Check the New York Times front page right now. I sort of check out the New York Times front page just sort of as an aside. I do tend to just pretty much daily scan the New York Times front page because it's a good indication of like what the top items on the media agenda are. And so take a look at NewYorkTimes.com right now, and it says in big, bold, dramatic words that they only use on rare occasions, Trump acquitted. Now, there will be Democratic Party spin. There will be spin on behalf of the hucksters who brought this farce about, that these blaring headlines pronouncing Trump acquitted are all part of their grand strategy. And this doesn't make them look bad. This makes them look tactically brilliant, that they create a set of circumstances where Trump can now, with some legitimacy, claim exoneration because he was acquitted. If you are now, an impeachment trial is sort of unique and not easily analogous to a typical criminal trial, but let's go with that. Let's go with that criminal trial analogy for a minute. If you are charged with crimes, say you're indicted and you take it to trial, and the jury finds you not guilty, That is tantamount to an exoneration. Because you're exonerated in the sense that the prosecution could not prove the charges against you, and therefore you cannot be punished for what they're alleging you did. And so I think if you were on trial and you were found not guilty, you would rightly view that as an exoneration of you, or at least a repudiation of the charges that were brought against you. And of course, that's how Trump is going to view this, and it's not entirely illegitimate for him to do so, because he was, in fact, acquitted. I simply don't believe that the entire Republican Party, with one exception, Mitt Romney, which I'll get to, but I simply don't believe that literally the entire Republican Party would have refused to vote for Trump's impeachment and or conviction. Because remember, 0 Republicans voted for it in the House. But I just don't believe that 99.9% of the Republican Party would have been against impeachment and conviction under every single set of circumstances. I think if there was clear evidence that Trump, for example, committed treason, committed bribery, committed a genuine high crime or misdemeanor, I think you would at least get a portion of the party who would back it. If public opinion shifted, if the evidence was genuinely overwhelming, if there was simply no doubt about his guilt in committing a bona fide high crime or misdemeanor. But that's not what this case was about. This case was about sort of obtaining a culmination of the broader narrative that had been set into place even before Trump assumed office. And I've been over this a million times, and I'm sick of talking about it. But unfortunately, it's important because not enough people in the commentariat really understand the nature of what occurred here. But this was a climax or a fulfillment of the Russia saga that began almost 4 years ago and was the dominant theme of Trump's entire presidency, and still is to some extent, and then kind of spawned this offshoot of a Ukraine impeachment based on mentioning Biden on a phone call and the military aid being withheld, but not actually withheld. I mean, the details now seem so frivolous and pointless because even though we've been over them a million times, it was never really about those details. I mean, whether aid was technically withheld, right, which it wasn't, because it was future dispersals of military aid and there's a 1 year lag time. But again, it was never about that. It was never about the details. It was about this idea of Trump soliciting foreign interference in 2020 and 2016 from Russia. Then that setting into motion the FBI investigation in 2016 into election interference by Russia and whether or not Trump was complicit in it. That morphed into Mueller. Mueller dragged on for nearly 2 years. Then there was the whole controversy about the submission of the Mueller report, whether it was portrayed accurately. Then you had elements of the Democratic Party responding to the activist and donor bases in the party, as well as media pressure from aligned sort of functionaries throughout the media. And impeachment gained steam based purely on Mueller. Remember, Elizabeth Warren endorsed or called for impeachment almost immediately after the Mueller report was published. That caused Warren's initial jump in the polls, so it made her a viable candidate. Whether she's viable right now is another story, but it did launch her into contention, at least early on in the primary process last summer, spring and summer. Then you had a majority of the Democratic caucus demanding impeachment prior to any Ukraine phone call, prior to anything related to what they ultimately ended up impeaching him on. And then the Ukraine phone call comes in, and it was the spark on the sort of campfire that they needed to, set alight the embers of impeachment. So the point is that the impeachment was what they were always sort of inescapably gravitating towards over time. And it was always going to come about as a result of something. That's what I think. That's what I was saying all along. You can go find my old tweets, my old articles. I've been consistent about this. And you know what? I was right. I was dead, darn, doggone right that they were going to impeach at some point. I did an interview with this guy, Michael Caputo, who was a former Trump aide who ended up getting embroiled in the Mueller investigation. And he said, he made a persuasive case to me on the podcast I did with him, a number of months ago now, last spring or summer, that he believed it was a metaphysical certitude, that was his phrase, that Trump would be impeached. And I agree with that because it aligned with the way I sort of analyzed the situation. Which is to say, again, that these details are almost irrelevant, I think. Now, it is sort of imperative to get into the weeds of those details if you want to be a conscientious citizen, in my case, like a citizen/journalist. So I did develop a full grasp of the minutia, but you always had to be sort of like aware and cognizant that the minutia is almost beside the point. The details that they went over at tedious length in the course of this impeachment inquiry and trial, while they needed to be followed just to have like a full documentary record of what transpired here, it was not really that relevant. And nothing hinged on those precise details. It was just this partisan collision that became inevitable because of what Trump represented when he was elected. There was such a backlash. There was such outrage and unwillingness to accept even the legitimacy of his election that impeachment was a foregone conclusion just because of the jolt to the system that Trump represented by his mere election. And the Democrats are going to say that, this doesn't help Trump. This doesn't embolden Trump. This doesn't give Trump a gigantic political gift because he now has these very favorable headlines where you can rightly say that he was exonerated or vindicated. It's just like, what? What are you talking about? Anybody who gets exonerated or vindicated of something that they have a set of offenses that they've been charged with is almost by definition granted a enormous benefit. So I don't know. It boggles the mind. I was sort of half watching this CNN town hall tonight, where they have 8 candidates who have been bestowed with the honor of having a CNN town hall, and one of them was Tom Steyer, because the nation must hear more from Tom Steyer. He definitely doesn't have enough paid advertising. Where if you're in New Hampshire like I am, you'll miss him. You won't even know he exists. No, it's the opposite. You see him every time you turn on the TV. He's like the Mike Bloomberg of New Hampshire and the 3 other early states. His ads are everywhere, on the radio, on TV, on billboards. Tom Steyer even sort of artificially inflated successfully his polling numbers to where he seems like he could possibly be competitive and get some delegates in Nevada and South Carolina. So, but Tom Steyer was asked about impeachment, obviously, because Tom Steyer in 2017 launched this organization called Need to Impeach, which turned out to be a boondoggle. It was a data collecting operation where he was gathering email addresses, phone numbers, contact information for people who were signing up for his organization under the auspices of trying to get Trump's impeachment. But what Tom Steyer ended up doing is he used that data for his own presidential campaign. So he collected the data on false pretenses from, sort of anxious people who wanted to feel like they were contributing to the effort to get Trump impeached. And then he just did pulled a switcheroo, and used the data for his own presidential campaign by renting it to himself. And I actually interviewed Tom Steyer about this a couple months ago. I never did the piece, and now I'm angry enough that I'm going to do the piece. I'm going to tie the piece on him sort of deceitfully collecting this data and then using it for his campaign. Now I have a hook to use the piece because to use that interview that I did with him a couple months ago because it connects to the impeachment failure. So thanks for reminding me of that. Actually, thanks for watching this live stream where I just reminded myself of that. Oh, but the point is that, so the Dana Bash was like, so Tom Steyer, Trump was acquitted today. What do you think? I mean, you were the impeachment guy. You were the one who bragged about launching a pro-impeachment movement. He's like, no, I don't think it was a failure. Look, Trump is corrupt, blah, blah, blah. So he didn't even really address whether the strategic utility of impeachment that he was asserting for years would redound to the benefit of Democrats and really hold Trump accountable. He didn't respond to any of that. All he did was launch into his typical, soliloquy about how Trump is the most corrupt president ever. Maybe Trump is the most corrupt president ever. Bernie also says that. Maybe he isn't. I don't know. I guess there's a plausible case to be made for it. But the point is the impeachment angle that you turbocharged and contributed to impeachment sort of overtaking the Democratic Party institutions for a number of years. Did that work? I mean, all you got to do is check the New York Times website right now, where it says Trump acquitted in huge bold letters, and then tell me if it worked. Yeah. It worked insofar as that Trump has the blemish, you might say, of only being the third president ever to be impeached. But has it materially diminished Trump's political standing? Has it made it less likely that he will win a re-election? I doubt it. I think most likely it has the opposite effect. I think Trump's base is hardened, and the notion of Trump's base is sort of overused. So I'm saying soft Trump supporters, I think, are hardened by this to the extent that they pay attention to. They only pick up snippets, and they kind of think it's a joke that they went down this impeachment road. And they were saying, you know what, maybe Trump hasn't delivered on all his promises, and maybe we have some qualms with how he's governed. But wow, his opposition seemed like total maniacs that they would attempt this ridiculous impeachment gambit that ended in humiliation and failure. And it's perfectly fitting that this epic failure on the part of Democrats would occur 2 days after another epic failure in Iowa, which still has not come to any conclusion. I don't see why anybody is viewing these trickles of results that we're periodically getting as legitimate when you have random precinct captains saying, hey, they didn't tabulate the votes correctly. I mean, if there was such a systematic breakdown in the caucus at a time when the data was being inputted, why should we have any confidence whatsoever that the data was properly collected in the first place? Why should we believe that the chain of custody of the sort of caucus ballots were properly handled in the midst of that chaos? It makes no sense. So I'm going to reiterate what I said the night of Iowa. Regard this caucus as nullified. And, Pete looks like he might win the delegate percentage or whatever. But even if Bernie wins it, it almost doesn't even matter. It needs to just be disregarded because there's no basis on which to trust the results. Given the magnitude of the failure. And but one thing that you don't have to worry about is anybody in the Democratic Party who is responsible for the failure taking responsibility for it in anytime soon. So Tom Steyer, who is the DNC chairman, who are now sort of presiding over the fallout of this Iowa fiasco. Tom Steyer's not going to take any personal responsibility, even though the DNC is intimately involved in sort of the orchestration of the Iowa caucus. They're going to claim sort of plausible deniability, even though the deniability that they're claiming is implausible. They're going to sort of distance themselves from it, and nobody's going to be held accountable because that's not how it works in the Democratic Party professional class. Everybody always has a built-in excuse for their failure. They never pay any professional consequences, really. I mean, you can find some very isolated examples of that happening, but taken broadly as a class, they don't pay any price when they commit even the most severe, almost comically egregious wrongdoing, as evidenced by the people who designed this app being Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign alums. Like, shouldn't having had a role in the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016 almost preclude you from having any subsequent high-profile role in the arena of electoral politics? You'd think so, but that's not how it works. So there's such sort of like an institutional momentum behind these people that's always just thrust them into new positions of prominence and influence, and it's just a fundamentally corrupt, sick system. So, yeah, I'm not going to go super long tonight because it's late. Still got stuff to do. A little bit of a Tulsi update. There was a sort of a rally or press conference outside the venue in Manchester, New Hampshire, here, where CNN is hosting the town halls at St. Anselm. Some of you watching this may have been there, and I know a bunch of people came up to me and recognized me either from these streams or from Twitter or elsewhere or YouTube. As often happens at Tulsi events, I almost feel like at times I'm stoking my own ego by going at these events. Everybody who comes up to me is very nice, and yeah, I mean, I thought it was a reasonably powerful show of force by people who are rightly denouncing CNN and the corporate media writ large for their manipulative tactics in marginalizing Tulsi, which is just so blatantly obvious. They're giving a town hall tomorrow to Deval Patrick, who is just a total non-entity. And so if they're giving a town hall to Deval Patrick, but not a town hall to Tulsi, and by every available metric, Tulsi is more formidable in New Hampshire than Deval Patrick, whether it's polling, whether it's donors, whether it's other sort of gauges of grassroots support and enthusiasm, even going based on the Iowa caucus results, which, remember, Tulsi did not contest, but the small amount that she did get in Iowa, she actually won a precinct, believe it or not, that places her above Deval Patrick. So you cannot cite a single objective criteria that would justify Deval Patrick getting a town hall on CNN and not Tulsi. I would even argue that Yang getting a town hall ahead of Tulsi, or Steyer getting a town hall ahead of Tulsi, is illegitimate because she's ahead of them in the polling averages in New Hampshire. And this despite Tom Steyer flooding the state with sort of endless advertising. Even potentially Klobuchar should not have a town hall ahead of Tulsi. I mean, the only ones really who deserve it, if you're just going based on polling, are ahead of Tulsi are Bernie, Warren, Biden, Buttigieg. So given that, I think the only viable conclusion that you could sort of infer from CNN's decision here is an active, malicious attempt to delegitimize her and to marginalize her. And you have to ask yourself why. I think there are a number of theories as to why. Maybe it is that Tulsi, in a sense, does pose a threat to the sort of established ways of conventional thinking as embodied by the corporate media. Now, Bernie also does to an extent, but he is now a national figure for 5 years, won 43% of the vote in 2016. So there's no, it's just, it would be impossible for CNN to exclude him. But Tulsi they can exclude because she's still a new enough figure that there's not enough. There wouldn't be enough widespread pressure to force their hand and uh, make them give Tulsi a platform. Uh, and then she had what I thought was one of her better actually town halls. I've now been to so many that I can sort of like compare and contrast them. And when there's one that's particularly good, it's notable. But and tonight's town hall in Keene was one of her better ones, in part because she was asked very good questions, including by a couple of people who, by one person in particular. If you're watching this, Sean, the Keene State sophomore who I met, he asked a question because he watched a video. This is it's weird because when you're at these events, things come weirdly full circle. So he asked a question to Tulsi about drug legalization based on a segment on YouTube from Kyle Kulinski, Secular Talk. And Kyle Kulinski's video at Secular Talk was based on an article that was based on my sort of report on one of Tulsi's town halls when she made a sort of far-reaching statement on drug legalization and how to incorporate the Portugal model potentially into the U.S. context by extricating drug policy from the domain of criminal law and putting it to civil and the civil and medical domain. So I don't know if the way I sort of laid that out made sense, but essentially what happened is that like the question at the Keene State student who knew me from Twitter, I guess, the question that he asked her, like ultimately also derived from me, if that makes sense. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is, the town hall was very good. There was another sort of question that she got from this perennial gadfly, Vermin Supreme in New Hampshire. You may know him if you follow New Hampshire primary. He's always around every 4 years, and just sort of excuse me, being a bizarre guy. He claimed that he won the Libertarian Party nomination for something or other in New Hampshire, but even though he asked her sort of a joking question, she responded by identifying the reasons why she thinks libertarians, to some degree, in New Hampshire have flocked to her or been intrigued by her, and she, touched on foreign policy and civil liberties, where there's always a progressive / libertarian convergence. So I have the quote somewhere on that. I'm sorry. So I gotta end now because I'm yawning and fading slightly. Okay. Good talking to you. We'll do it again tomorrow, I'm sure. Keep on keeping on, and that's it.